away.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm brand new. I'm June Miller-Richards. I've recently joined Entity Academy as the Director of University Partnerships, and I'm thrilled to be here today. The bulk of my professional life has really been in marketing, with a lot of time spent in magazines, most notably with Los Angeles Magazine, where I was VP of Marketing, and Rolling Stone as West Coast Marketing Director. But I think it was my background in journalism that was key to going with, as they say, to the dark side in marketing, but was key to bridging the gap between the magazine's creative sides and the business side. Something that anyone in business, no matter whether you're doing tech sales or data science, you kind of need to navigate all the different parts of a company, and how to do that. I got my degree from a school on the East Coast called Lehigh University, which is pretty well known for engineering and business. I got my degree in journalism. It was a smaller department, great school, but it had just gone co-ed when I joined there. So I know firsthand how tricky it is to walk that tightrope with areas that are more dominated by men. And it's kind of sad that it's still like that, but you know what? We're all here to help each other, and that's what Entity is all about. So we're here to do that, but enough about me. We're here today. I'm really excited to introduce Elizabeth Andrew. Let me tell a little bit about Elizabeth. How's everybody doing? First of all, are we happy to be here? It's Friday. Thanks for being here, and thanks for spending part of your afternoon with us. And we're so glad to have Elizabeth here with us today. She spent most of her professional life in areas that have been more male dominated, first in financial services, then in tech. But between finance and tech, her tech lives in San Francisco, she was at home raising her kids for 17 years on the East Coast. When she decided she wanted to return to the workforce and pursue a tech career, she found that a 17-year gap in her resume was not easy, and it really hindered her from getting hired. It wasn't easy, but she worked her way up to become one of the top producing sales executives at a high-tech startup in San Francisco. Now she's at Pluma, a web and mobile platform that has been around since 2015 for talent retention and professional development. And she advocates the need for corporations to develop what they call returnship programs to help people return to the workforce, especially within technology companies. Elizabeth is a well-known return to work expert. She's established herself as a leader, a motivator, and a role model with her inspiring story of career reentry by breaking barriers into the San Francisco technology space. And we are thrilled to have her share her personal success story and how she got where she is with you. We appreciate her talking to us about women and tech. Elizabeth, if you can take some time, maybe 15 minutes or so on your personal journey, that'd be great. The more relatable, the better. We just want this to be casual and fun today and really be able to help everyone that's here on the call. We have single moms and people looking for relevancy in the 21st century economy. So whatever you're willing to share. Elizabeth, I'll let you take it from here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. And June, thank you very much for that kind introduction.
Oh, you're so welcome. And welcome.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of this academy and what everybody's doing. I have a little bit of insight to the backgrounds of many of you. I understand there are some single moms. There are people who have gone through career transitions and all sorts of things. And so I'm here today to share a little bit about my background and my experiences. And at the end, I hope I can share some resources with you that might be helpful as you build your careers moving forward. So to start out, to give you a little bit of information, I have a very unusual background for tech and for tech sales. I am actually from the San Francisco Bay Area originally. And I started out in the financial services area. As June had mentioned, I started with a company called Franklin Templeton Funds down on the peninsula. And I started out in corporate training and development and realized I was giving presentations for hundreds of customers that would be coming in from all over the world. I realized I could be doing the same thing on the sales side and making a lot more money. So I decided to transition into sales. And at the time, there were very, very few women in financial services investment selling. We hear a lot about the rise of the female enterprise, the female leader And female salespeople in today's world, that wasn't the case back in those days. I had an opportunity to go over to Wells Fargo Asset Management to help them build out their very first mutual fund company. It was very much of a startup, even though it was backed by Wells Fargo. And there were literally 3 external salespeople, a national sales manager, and myself. And we took that mutual fund company from 0 to $1 billion in assets for Wells Fargo. They hired me from Franklin to come build an inside sales team. And so I hired, trained, and managed 15 inside salespeople to mirror our national expansion as we continued to grow. The last region that we went into as a mutual fund company was the Northeast, and they asked me to go open up that region. So I did. I was in my late 20s. I moved from San Francisco to Boston in January of all times. If any of you guys are from the Northeast, Maria, I see you going, quite eye-opening. I had never lived in snow before, and I was working out of my house in my car. This is back when sales was literally carrying a bag. Carrying the bag is sort of the image for sales, but it was literally carrying a bag of collateral. I was calling on investment advisory firms, the Merrill Lynch, Smith Barney. Back in those days, there was a company called Payne Weber, and I was selling investment products wholesale through investment advisors. And to say that it was male dominated is an understatement. It was 99.9% white men that looked like my father. And I was often giving presentations to as many as 500 people, and I would be the only woman in the room. I saw that as a pretty exciting challenge. I am not afraid of putting myself out there. I guess that's part of the sales DNA, but I'm not afraid of challenge. And so I literally started from the ground up, and I built that region. I took it from 0 to 70 million in sales. So it was a very exciting time in my life and in my career. When I moved east, my family, I'm from again, I mentioned the San Francisco Bay Area, from Oakland to be specific. My family said, go for 2 years, have a great time, don't fall in love. I ended up meeting a New York Italian character and moving down to New York and getting married. And at the time, it made sense to start a family and take some time out of the workforce. And that, what ended up thinking was going to be a year or two, ended up being 17 years as a stay-at-home mom. During those years, I happened to be one of these people that, really likes to contribute and give back and be busy. And so I did a ton of nonprofit work. I did event planning. I did fundraising for a number of different nonprofits in the tri-state area. Many of those jobs that I did during that time was as challenging as anything I've ever done professionally. And yet, when I went to re-enter the workforce, I found that I was completely unemployable. In 2011, I moved back to the San Francisco Bay Area with my family and felt like my kids were getting a little bit older and it was time to get back to work. And wow, was that eye-opening. It was really, not only had I finished my career 17 years earlier, but it was on the East Coast. So I was starting all over. I did have some family friends in California, but no professional contacts whatsoever. And I couldn't get anybody to return my phone call. And so I started doing whatever I possibly could. There's so many different types of battles that diverse populations face. I had people telling me that I should be a secretary or an assistant, and that is a very, very challenging and respectable career. I just don't have the skill set for it, and they never would have said that to my my husband at the time. So it's really eye-opening when you're in that situation and looking for work. I took every opportunity I could. I did take some jobs as an assistant. I actually, because I'm in sales and I'm a networker, I am not afraid to try any type of avenue I could. And I found my very first job back on Craigslist, of all things. Who knew? And it was actually a very, very good job. The pay was not great, but it was working for the West Region Director of Sales for Putnam Investments. So it was along the lines of what I had done before. I was really assisting him in any kind of sales enablement that needed to be done in empowering his sales team. And it got me back into the city and got me, sort of got something on my resume again. And I was working 20 hours a week in that role. And I did that for a year. And at that point, I just felt like there's no fun to be had in financial services anymore. And, the world has changed so much. As long as I was completely reinventing myself, I would have had to sit for licenses and all that sort of thing again. So much happening in California in technology. As long as I was reinventing myself, why not try tech? And so I did. And I had done inside sales, external sales, sales training and development, sales leadership. And I found my first job at a healthcare tech startup running sales operations, which was, it was fantastic. It was very, very challenging for me because I was one of these old school, use my day timer to manage my calendar. And, I had to learn all the tech tools. What I speak to a lot when I talk to companies and try to get them to consider hiring people that have career gaps and transitions on their resume is the fact that you can teach the tech tools in a year. You can get involved in programs like all of you are in right now, and you can learn those basic skills, but you can't teach somebody years of experience that you have and you may have in different backgrounds that you have and that you've come from. And so, I got up to speed within a year on all of the tech tools and came to find pretty quickly that a lot of the things had not changed as much as people will lead you to believe. And a lot of the skills that I had and that I had developed, not only from my early career, but also from raising a family, were really applicable to what I'm doing. And, I'm a mom. I'm good at wearing a lot of hats. I like working in earlier stage companies because I can wear a lot of hats. I find for myself, when you're in big publicly traded companies, it can get more siloed. People tend to fit in one or the other. But I found as a mom, it was really a great place for me to be in a high growth company. So I worked at this healthcare tech company for a year. I was about employee number 29 there. It got me technology on my resume. It got me up to speed on the tools. Unfortunately, like a lot of startups, the company went bankrupt and ran out of funding in a year. So I found myself in a job search again. It took me a little bit of time, but this one was a little bit easier than coming off of a long transition. I found a job through AngelList. If you haven't had a chance to look at AngelList, it can be a great job board. And I'm going to provide you guys at the end of this call, as I mentioned, a number of resources that might be outside of your normal Monster and Indeed and LinkedIn, which are huge platforms. There are a lot of other tools out there for finding great opportunities that might be a little bit smaller world. So there are more opportunities there. But I found a job at a company called HelloSign. I was about employee number 45 at HelloSign, and the VP of sales there really took a chance on me. I had not been in he hired me as an individual contributor, a salesperson. I had not been in an IC role in 20 years. I had never sold SaaS. And I was hired onto a team of very stereotypical SaaS sales dudes between the ages of 28 and 35. And from the moment I got there, I was a top producer, month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year. The VP of sales realized that I had a lot of experience. And so he used me, to kind of, in a lot of different capacities, to work cross-functionally. I worked with, I represented the sales team in our weekly marketing meetings. I worked with our product team to help build out roadmap. I trained up SDRs. I mentored some of the younger account executives, and I loved it. It became like a family to me, as you hear, startups can become. And we had a lot of fun in those years of really growing HelloSign. When we got to a size that we were big enough that we needed more sales leadership, then the VP asked me to move into a senior sales manager role. So I was running both our emerging and general business account executive teams. And then in January of 2019, we were acquired by Dropbox. And that was very exciting. And so, it was kind of one of those moments where you get to participate in an exit for an exciting startup. I spent a year. Once you get acquired through acquisitions, if any of you guys have been through that, sometimes people start to peel off, and our VP of sales left shortly thereafter. So I spent a year at Dropbox, really running the entire sales organization, reporting directly to the COO of HelloSign, and it was very fun. Getting back to that place, I think if Dropbox had been my first job, as you hear some of these big tech companies, we had a Michelin star chef and a gym and all those crazy perks that get people excited. I think if it had been my first job, it would have been my only job. But as I'm older, and that's not as important to me. I missed that opportunity to work cross-functionally and really solve problems that you get when you're in a really big publicly traded company. So I made the decision in mid-January of last year to leave to a very early stage startup. Of course, who knew the world was falling apart? I stayed there until May, and then took a little time off this summer and found Pluma, which is a company I joined in December as VP of sales. I'm very happy to be here. So that's kind of a little bit about, my background. I'm happy to, I know that there's a number of questions that came up. I have done a lot. I was going to put together a presentation deck I shared with June coming into this. I've done a lot of speaking on career reentry, but also on women in leadership, women in tech sales. And so, I'm happy to kind of provide any kind of insight or help, that will help you guys in navigating what's going to be next for you when you move into your next career move.
Elizabeth, I have a number of questions that our audience submitted ahead of time. So why don't we go ahead, if you're okay with that, I'll go through those questions. Then what I'd like to do is take any other questions from the audience. And there's, if you know Zoom, there's a raise hand feature. So if you want to say something, either myself or Angelica, we'll make sure that everyone gets all their questions answered today. But I think I'll go through the ones that you sent into us, which was great. Thank you for the thought put into those. So I'll get going on those. So the first one we have is, Elizabeth, after your 17-year break, what made you decide to get into tech sales? And then what was your trajectory like once you returned after your 17-year career break?
Yeah, and that, I think that just really comes back to what I was saying before, was that, I spent a year in financial services. And by the way, I didn't share the fact, there's that saying, it takes 7 years to be an overnight success or an overnight sensation, right? It took me a number of years before I actually even got that job on Craigslist at 20 hours a week. I did some, what I would put on my resume as consulting, but I really did anything I possibly could. I had a friend who worked for an investment bank, and she had a colleague that was leaving on maternity leave. I sat in and was an assistant to somebody there. I did a little bit of recruiting for somebody else. So I kind of took whatever job I could and called it consulting, right, for a couple of years. But I just found that, that financial services had changed so much. And San Francisco was just exciting to me when I moved back with everything going on in tech. And it was interesting because in my early career, I was the only woman in the room. I went from being the only woman in the room to the oldest person in the room pretty quickly. And, I was close to 50 when I started, back in tech. So, again, I clearly like a challenge, I guess, but it's been a lot of fun. And it's interesting because I think this is part of sales too, right? It's like you have to be a bit of a chameleon. And, when I was in investment sales, I was in my blue suit, and back when we wore nylons or pantyhose, carried that bag, in the snow. Sounds like, oh my God, I walked to school 10,000. But it really was. And then, of course, I started working at HelloSign, and we were very much of a family. The CEO was in his early 30s, and it was just a really techie environment. Initially, we were in this near the Tenderloin in San Francisco, in a really um, gritty office. It was fun, and I remember I was in there wearing a hoodie, and my CEO was like, "Have you always worn hoodies?" But it's fun to kind of be with a really. It went from being this investment world to being an incredibly diverse team. We had just an incredibly diverse team of experience and cultures, and we loved selling. My favorite celebration in the 4.5 years that I was at HelloSign was Diwali. We'd get all dressed up in saris and have a great celebration there. And so um, I really loved that piece of it helped me grow as a person.
What a wonderful range of experiences. How did you recreate yourself for the job market you went into, and especially a job market that really was designed for men? And how did you find those hidden jobs? You found that Craigslist job, but how did you? Where did you look? How did you? What was your process?
Yeah. So, I was starting, like I mentioned, from the ground up. So, I recognized pretty quickly that, first of all, I recognized very quickly that recruiters were not my friend. Recruiting firms were not going to help me. If I could even get them to return my call, I recognize now that they're in sales. So it's really easy to take a square peg and put it in a square hole. And that's what they want to do. So they want to take somebody who's currently doing the job and put them in another job. So they're not going to be able to sell the value add that I had, or that you have when you come from a different background. So I learned early that they weren't gonna help me. But other than that, I built out a LinkedIn, presence. I I'm a networker. I am in sales. I started trying to become a student of my profession. When I knew I wanted to be in tech sales, I started following things on social media, such as TechCrunch, all of the different kinds of media sources. I would look at people that you would admire. Sheryl Sandberg, was somebody who was having such a great career at that particular juncture. And I'd start to follow people that she followed on her LinkedIn page. And, you start to process information. And so and then I'd start to follow companies that were advertised on TechCrunch. And it was actually TechCrunch. I saw they were having a meetup in Golden Gate Park, and I think it was $25 to go. It was on a weekend. They were going to have food trucks. And I called up a girlfriend of mine. I said, "Will you go with me to this meetup, and just see if we can network?" And she said, "Sure." At the 11th hour, she canceled. So I just went by myself. And I didn't know a soul, but I walked around that, and it was very intimidating. There were groups of, people that came from certain companies all sitting together with their matching, T-shirts that had their whatever startup it was, and but I just walked around, and I ended up meeting. Actually, I met a gentleman that had just moved to the Bay Area from India. Actually, he was the CEO of an AI company, and I connected with him on LinkedIn and followed up with him, and nothing came of it job wise for me. But 2 years later, he ended up buying the HelloSign API from me. So you just never know who you're going to meet at any given time. I mean, this is a little bit of a different time in the world, right? Because we can't go to those things. But there's also meetups. Another thing that was very, very powerful for me is, again, it's the networking. There was a platform which isn't even there anymore, but I think it was called Blast Breakers. It was kind of like there's another one called Lunch Club. don't know if you guys have heard of Lunch Club. I've done one or two where they'll connect you with somebody else. You can choose once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. And so you have a 30-minute Zoom meeting. So it's just a networking thing. And I met somebody who told me about Glassbreaker. She told me about an organization called the Club of Silicon Valley. It's a women's organization, and there's a lot of them. There are lean-in circles. There are things that are not even just for women. There's the Chamber of Commerce. There's a lot of different organizations out there that are professional organizations that you can get involved in. And so I went to this annual dinner, which was down in San Jose, which is really a couple hours from where I live in Oakland. And I went to this annual dinner not knowing anybody at the Club of Silicon Valley, and I found out that they have an incubator for women leaders. And so I applied, and there were 10 of us, and we met once a month for a year, and it was all about building your external brand and helping to lift other women up. And I mean, it was life-changing. It really, really helped me. And there's a lot of, I started getting involved in things like mentoring circles, and there's other organizations. There's Leading Women in Technology, LWT, which is a program. And again, I'll give you a lot of these resources after, but you can join these different organizations and network and meet people. And it really, really helps when it comes to, trying to find your next opportunity.
It's not easy. And I think their next question is, that's a basic one. How do you get into tech sales if you don't have a technical background or a sales background? How do you do that?
Yeah. There's that saying that, there's a number of sayings, right? I'd rather be lucky than good and all that kind of stuff. Fake it till you make it. You've probably heard all of those kind of things, but hard work, right? And determination. And like part of sales, part of the sales process, and I'm not going to say I didn't have my feelings hurt a million times through that process, but you get used to hearing no, and you just need one opportunity. You don't need 10, you just need one. And so you just have to brush yourself off, and sometimes you do what you got to do and take a day off and have that glass of wine or whatever it is you got to do. But you brush yourself off and you get back up there and you just keep trying. And, I think you focus. The best thing, and this is what I always say to my sales teams, focus on what you can control. The quantity of the people you talk to and the quality of your presentation and really what you're doing. And I'm not sure how many of you guys are sales oriented or technical and that sort of thing, but you are selling yourself when you're looking for opportunities, right? And so your story and your pitch gets better. And, as you continue to learn and grow and kind of figure out what your value is. And, we are in an interesting time where, I'm not going to lie. I mean, and this is part of the presentation I was putting together. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have seen the numbers, right? Like diversity numbers, and I can send some of this over. If you haven't looked at the Women at Work study that's done by McKinsey and Lean In, that talks about the number of women in leadership and the daunting numbers. I mean, women in leadership, women in companies, and women in sales outperform men. The companies will outperform if there's one woman co-founder. They outperform, diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams. So, in fact, there's companies with females in top management deliver an average of 34% greater return to shareholders. Companies with diverse leadership are 15% more likely to outperform industry averages. And these numbers go on and on and on. And yet at the same time, you see such low numbers. I mean, when you look at the C-suite executives, it's 19% are women, 3% are women of color. And, the numbers, you can't deny the data. And that's one of the things we learned you learn in technology, is the power of data. And by the way, I do know I have a very, very good friend I work shoulder to shoulder with at Hello Sign, who is a coach specifically around women of color. And she's phenomenal and one of my dear friends. But it's, and that's part of the reason I do get into these conversations is this isn't, part of my job, but it's so important. It's so important to, um, to help companies be more successful and, to add value. And, women need to do a better job of negotiating. We need to do a better job of asking for the jobs and positioning ourselves in those positions. And yeah, I mean, I'll pause there, but
And that totally makes sense. And certainly, when you think about, you said that you were a little older. We won't talk what age, but tech is always known as people in their 20s, or it's just everyone's young. But now with the world changing so much, what advice would you give older women, 40, 45 and up and more, on that perhaps due to COVID lost their job, and lost not just a job, but lost their career and their identity, and have to make a shift? How do you, what kind of advice would you give someone like that? And how do you compete with younger people when that's, when it's so competitive now?
yeah.
What advice would you give?
So the number one thing, I would say the biggest thing that people run into that are looking to get back, really at any age, but after a break or transition, is confidence. And, that comes with practice. And, it's, I would take every interview I could get, and anything, and, try to get into those conversations, and you just take it as learning, and there were some pretty horrific things that were said to me at different times, but you just really need to recognize your value and what you bring to the table. And I always make bullet points, whenever I get into a conversation of like, some of those things, like you can use the data and statistics, to help show your value. And, I also tell people to try to brush up on your skills. And, that's something that's really tricky, get into some sort of program like you're in now. I remember just I signed up and took a, Excel class just to brush up on Excel, because I hadn't really used Excel since I had been in college. And, any kind of, there's LinkedIn Learning is phenomenal. I mean, there's so many classes. You have classes that are being taught by the top in whatever area you are interested in going into on LinkedIn Learning. The other thing that is something that I tell people to do, and this is something that was really, really a game changer for me. Now this is getting a little personal, but I was married 21 years, and then I went through a divorce, and I was a single mom, and I was left with nothing. And so I had these 3 beautiful kids that I needed to provide for, which was a driving factor for me to get back too. I mean, it was there were some scary times there. Everybody goes through their challenges, I know. And, I learned, like, when you think about a company, you think about how, a CEO would run his company. I really looked at myself as like, I'm not a CEO. I don't necessarily aspire to be a CEO, but I am the CEO of Elizabeth Inc. I am responsible for myself. And so I'm going to treat myself like a business, which means I'm going to try to bring in more than I spend. I need to balance my finances and manage my finances like I would if I were running a company. I also try to, I really just tried to think of myself as like, I'm going to run myself like a corporation. And so I'm going to come up with my board of advisors. And so I have my own personal board of advisors. I have a very, very good friend of mine who is a lawyer. I mean, we've never worked together. She's in an entirely different space. But if I ever have a legal issue, I could call her. I have a friend who's in marketing. I have a friend that I worked with at HelloSign for years who is in marketing, but she's a content person. So anytime I write a blog, if it's something that's important to me, I'll say, hey, can you just look this over for me? So I have my board of advisors that are kind of my inner circle friends in many ways. And sometimes, sometimes they're not, I mean, my brother never left the career, the workforce, and has had a pretty good career. He's in property management, but I can have him look over my resume, or you set up that kind of that your board of advisors that you can turn to if you have questions on different aspects of your career development.
I think, and that this kind of segues into the next. I think the next question is like, it's like, how do you manage your career path after a long absence in the workplace? Is it different now than it was then? What are you doing to manage where you are now and where you want to go?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, one of the things about life, right, is like nobody hits 50 unscathed. Everybody has their, I won't curse, but has their stuff. And it's humbling. Life is humbling, and it teaches you things, right? So it teaches you to roll with the punches a little more. And the biggest challenge I run into when, and this is a tricky thing because, right, I'm sitting here saying you need to negotiate and you need to ask for the money you're worth. But one of the biggest challenges I find when I'm mentoring somebody who's looking to get back to the workforce is that, like, I have this one friend of mine, and she's super smart. She had a great career. She was out for quite a long time. She had an MBA from University of Chicago. And so she really feels like she needs to go back to work at a director level or above. And, she left the workforce as a VP. Well, she's been looking for work for 5 years, and I have since, I started answering telephones and doing, whatever I could, and have advanced to, above where she wants to enter. So, it's like, it's being humble and knowing maybe, every role isn't going to be perfect, and so I think, what's that saying again? Again, I think it's Sheryl Sandberg that said, it's life is not a ladder. It's not a career ladder. It's a jungle gym, so you have to kind of navigate it. And I just find like it's, if you're good, you'll rise to the top. And,
and I think you started off, you said, with a 20-hour gig. And I think a lot of people are in the same kind of situation where work life is a little fluid now. We're all working from home, or it's just a lot more, it's different. A lot of freelance opportunities out there. When you are a freelancer, how do you sufficiently use your time the best way and most productively that's beneficial to a company? Because we all know it's different than when you're a full-time employee, but especially now. What kind of words of wisdom do you have on that end?
Yeah, again, that's, that comes down to networking. And again, on those resources I'll send out to you guys, there are a number of different organizations, and I can just rattle a couple of them off. The Mom Project, Flex Jobs, Reach Hire, Working Mother. These are different kinds of organizations. I think it's Reach Hire or Flex Jobs that has a lot of kind of contract jobs that you can do on a volunteer basis. I often find that, volunteering it's tricky, right? Because we all want money. I mean, we need, you work to make a living, right? But things can happen very organically that way. And another one of my friends who was really struggling, single mom, and she couldn't get anybody to interview her at all. And this is before COVID, but I said, why don't you look at becoming a contractor for TaskRabbit? I don't know if you've heard of TaskRabbit, but it's one of those gig economy companies like Uber, like becoming an Uber driver. But what they do is, like, we used to hire TaskRabbit all the time at HelloSign, and it could be, answering the phones or helping us fold T-shirts, or there's all different kinds of projects that you would call in a TaskRabbit, assembling IKEA furniture. And she did. She found a great job with I can't remember. I think it was Sephora or might be wrong on that, but she did a few different TaskRabbit jobs, but then they were in the office or they're interacting with HR or different people on the team, and they get to meet them. And so, I think that oftentimes that can really lead to relationships.
That sounds great. One of the here's one that I think all of us, or anyone that has to reply to something, or as a resume gap. What was the most memorable question you ever got asked about your resume gap and what you were doing for 17 years, and how did you respond to it?
So this is an answer that I don't like, and I think it's subjective. But resumes are tricky, first of all, because I built out a resume. This is off of LinkedIn. Now, more and more people are using LinkedIn, and resumes are becoming less important. But I picked 3 people that I know that are very successful, my advisors, who've had great careers, and I asked each of them to look at my resume. One of them said, your resume should never be more than 1 page. Another said, I think you should have all 3 pages if it's going to have all your information. The other one was somewhere in the middle, right? And I respect them all, but it's just a very subjective thing. I applied for, and this is back between 2011 and 2015. But I applied for a lot of jobs. I had built out a really robust resume with all of the nonprofit work I had done. And again, it's as hard as anything I've ever done professionally. I raised $1 million for a nonprofit in the New York area, in fundraising. I ran large scale events and auctions and things like that to help raise money for organizations. And you're dealing with volunteers. You can't fire them if they don't do their job. So there are challenges that are sort of outside of the corporate walls that people may or may not be aware of. And yet it wasn't until I took all of that off of my resume that anybody took me seriously. So I ended up taking all of my volunteer work, 17 years of volunteer work, off of my resume before anybody took me seriously.
We have 2 more questions here, but we had someone just ask a quick question, and I think there are 2, and I think these are pretty relevant to just life. And the first one is someone was asking, I was working at a job that was a toxic environment. I want to make sure that next job I get doesn't happen. How do you vet situations like that? What do you do? Because we always hear the rumors about tech being so rife with toxic environments. How do you get away from that?
Yeah, I mean that no doubt. I mean there's no doubt, and it's that's one of the things that infuriates me, because all these Me Too and all these other things that happen, and there were a lot of times I put up with things that I wouldn't if I weren't a single mom with 3 kids and needing a job. But I don't think that I would have been heard, and I'm not proud of that. But it's that's where I think once you can advance your career to a point, you're on much better ground to stand up and promote people and lift people up. And that's I'm passionate about that, is like lifting people up and trying to help people be better. There's definitely some toxic things that happen, and it's the biggest thing, and I honestly have never been so happy that I'm fairly new in my job, but I love my boss. My boss is the CEO of the company. And so, I think the best thing that you can do to mitigate that when you're interviewing is interview your boss, because I think that is the thing that makes the biggest difference. If you've got somebody that you feel's got your back, then I feel like it's always a healthier environment.
Here's one as well. This is from the same person that asked this question, asking, I'll just read the question. I'm Black. I want to see how you get companies to hire Black people. You were talking about something about a person of color earlier. What are you seeing? Tech, again, is kind of known for being male and white.
Yeah.
How do you get around this? How does a black person, as a Black woman, make inroads?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the numbers are staggering. It's not good for women. It's even worse for Black women. And I believe that it's critical to find an environment that embraces diversity. And I went when I was interviewing after the healthcare tech startup before I found HelloSign. I interviewed with one or two companies where I walked in and I knew right away. I was the oldest person in there by 20 years, and it was 90% white men. I knew it wasn't a fit. I knew I didn't want to be there. And so I it's unfortunate. And I think, there are a lot of, first of all, there's a lot of DEI, and that was something I would really try to focus on in BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. There's a lot of different organizations and groups and LinkedIn groups, and job boards and, support. And now that I'm selling coaching, or I'm managing a team that's selling coaching, I'm getting HR teams are calling us all the time, wanting to coach women of color and women in general, into those more senior leadership roles and succession. And it is an initiative for a lot of companies. And so there is opportunity out there. This is not something that was in financial services 20 years ago. Those conversations, and it's sickening, but it's true. And but there is a lot of opportunity. I just think that it's really critical that you want to be in an environment that it's not just getting the job, but you want to be in an environment where you can be successful. And again, I think that comes to interviewing your boss, looking at the leadership team, looking at what their initiatives are. And as a hiring manager, my number one priority is to get the best person for the job, and I don't look at anything else. But I mean, aside from that, I want equal representation. And there's that's one of the critical things about getting diverse diverse populations into leadership roles, right? Because there's this data that women in sales outperform men in sales, not by a lot, but it's like 62% is men, 67% is women. 25% of tech sales are women. And it's like 12% of tech sales leaders are women. But female tech sales leaders tend to have a sales team that's 50-50, whereas male tech sales leaders tend to have 80-20 women. So it's getting into a place where you can be. And it's hard. It's hard on what you're specializing in. So HelloSign, and I think I mentioned to you, it was we had a lot of women in color. We had, we were a very, very diverse, global, diverse population. We were 40% women as a company. But candidly, if you really break it down, if you really want to start looking at the numbers, all of the women were in HR and marketing. I was one of maybe two in tech sales. It was abysmal in the engineering team. I think at one point when we were at Dropbox, 3 out of 100 engineers were women. So it's and they made it a really big initiative, from that point to try to hire more. But
Well, and we're talking about tech sales. What are the qualifications when you're trying to find a job in tech sales? What qualifications are employers looking for? And then also the second part of that question is: this a salary-based job? Is it salary plus commission? Is it just commission? How do you make that good money?
yeah, tech sales, sales in any capacity, it tends to be there tends to be more generous compensation in sales, right? But it's a lot more risk, right? You start over every month. In general, if you're looking at an account executive role, a direct sales role, and this is a generalization, but it tends to be 50-50, half commission, half of a variable. They'll set a quota for you, whatever your quota is. If you hit your quota for the year, then you get your full variable, and it's uncapped, so you can make more money. So there's a lot of upside potential. One of the quickest paths, not the path I took, but a path that a lot of people take to get into tech sales, and this generally tends to be younger, people in their first role or out of college or maybe 1 year of experience, is the SDR route, sales development or business development route, which is a very heavy outbound. It's a grind, but that's one path. The other is just having some sort of sales experience in your background. There's different, of course, there's a lot of different types of companies, right? It's almost like schools and universities, right? Like, you can't say private or public education, or, it varies a lot. There's some universities have much better diversity numbers. It varies company by company. If you're new, and this was part of, for me, like having never sold SaaS, and having not been in an individual contributor role for 20 years, there was no way I was going to get a job at Dropbox. But, if you go on Angel List, I mean, you could get a job, all of you guys could get hired right now for a job that's 100% commission, but nobody wants, I wouldn't recommend that to anybody, but, you could do that just to get some experience. On Angel List, it's funny. I mean, you could get a role as a co-founder of a company if you're willing to do it for what they call stock options, which generally amounts to nothing, but just to get experience. So
it's not easy. We're getting close to our 4:00 time. So we have two more questions that were submitted. Do you have time to take those? And then,
yeah,
if you have a few minutes left, I just want to give you the time that we're getting close to the time we said. So, but thank you. I appreciate it. Here's one. How do you interview well? What are your suggestions for going into an interview? What should you do? How do you make an impression? How do you put yourself out there where someone's going to say, wow, that person not only is good for the job, but it's like the great fit and all that. So talk to us about interviewing, especially now when you're not doing things in person.
Yeah, that's so interesting too, because having gone through my whole career, I shared with you that I had joined a early stage startup in mid-January, and it, for a host of reasons, didn't work out. I left in May. So I took some time this summer, but really a 6-month hiatus between that and starting Pluma, and did a fair amount of soul searching and figuring out what my next space was going to be in my next role, and had to do this remote interviewing, which is a lot of Zoom. And it takes some adjusting, compared to the normal interviewing process. But I think the biggest thing in role playing is just trying to be authentic and just be yourself. If you can, there are a number of things when it comes to selling yourself or branding yourself, and when people talk about public speaking, and this is more, this isn't like standing up and speaking for an hour, but people prepare what they're going to talk about. They prepare their presentation, but they don't practice. I think it's really, really helpful in interviewing to practice. Find a friend, somebody that you can role play with a little bit. I think that always does wonders. Or just practice on jobs you don't want, but practice that interviewing process. Write down 3 or 4 bullet points that you want to get across on your strengths, and things that are important to you, that you think are going to set you apart. Being authentic is the most important thing. I tend to hire, I mean, of course you want skills and people that can do the job, but I also tend to hire on people that I want to work with, and people that I like, right? And enjoy being with, and people that are real and humble and hardworking, but willing to have some fun, and they're just being authentic. I think is really a critical part of interviewing.
I have two more questions, and then if you have a few minutes, we'll throw it open. But we have two more. So do you have time for two more?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Question here is, the question is, I want to build a platform for a business. How do I start? And I want to learn to build a good career. And that I think is interesting too, because you want to be strategic about what you're doing. You want to start off doing whatever you need to do, but then how do you build that platform that's going to be good for you and for business?
This is something that I learned quite a bit about in the that incubator I did for women leaders, but it's not rocket science. It's it's a lot of social media. There was a T-shirt that I had seen a couple years ago. I almost got from one of my kids at Target. It was, I wish my life was as good as it looks on Facebook. I wish my life was as good as it looks on LinkedIn. It's kind of, first of all, I would start with building out your LinkedIn profile, because anything business related is for the most part is LinkedIn. There are exceptions. I don't think there's as much presence from healthcare professionals on LinkedIn as there are in some other verticals. But it's starting to follow thought leaders, starting to engage with thought leaders. So liking content, becoming a student of your own profession, and really understanding, what people are talking about. What is the lingo? What is the language? Then starting to slowly, as you add people, and will add people that I respect. I'd love to add you to my professional network. I always send a message if I'm going to connect with somebody on LinkedIn, and then starting to create a presence and engaging. Join groups, and I look at the groups that people have. So that you can see, they start to come up on your feed, so you can see things that pertain to whatever your area is, and then like content, and then share content, and then when you get a chance, write a little blog, and start just putting a little paragraph out there on on professional content that you find relevant to what it is that you're doing. I also then as part of COVID, we were all looking for things to do at the beginning of COVID, and outside of work. And I did some virtual cooking classes with my kids. I started painting a little bit. I tried to take an instrument. That was a disaster. But I joined this group. I had some people say, "Gosh, you should write a book on your career reentry." And so there's a woman by the name of Christine Carlson. She and her husband, who had passed away 15 years ago, wrote the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff books. And she has a book incubator class. So I joined this book incubator class, and I ended up meeting, 8 or 10 other women, and we were writing our books. And the one thing that Chris Carlson really shared is that the biggest thing about becoming a published author is building a platform. You're not going to be able to ever sell a book unless you have a platform. So it's just trying to to add people into your network, into your professional network, and fold them in, and get involved in different organizations and different groups, and connecting with other leaders. And before you know it, you have a fair amount of people out there. And it takes a little bit of time, and it takes, you need to kind of be engaged in it on a daily basis. But it definitely, all of everything that I've done over the last 5 to 10 years outside of work on career reentry, I've done some mentoring, leading women in technology. I mentored there. I've spoken at Cal and Stanford to students, and San Francisco State and Dreamforce, and I haven't been paid for any of that, but it's definitely helped my platform and my career and my network.
One last question. This is a big one. Got to dig deep for this one. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self? What would you say to her, knowing what you know now? And what would you say?
Buckle up, Buttercup. No, listen, I mean, we all have our ups and downs of life, right? But I think that it just gets better. I mean, it's not always the last, there was a period of time things were pretty challenging, but, you know, I don't feel like I'm in my mid 50s. I feel, and my friends and my colleagues, I mean, some of my colleagues are closer in age to my kids than they are to me. But when I'm at work, we're friends, and, we're professionals, and we work together. And, I think it's just a number. Age is just a number. And, there's a lot of opportunities. It's never too late. Never too late to reinvent, to transition, to, you might have to stick at something for a little while. You might have to stick in that job that's a little toxic for a little while till you can get yourself to a place that is better. But, don't give up, and it'll happen.
Well, thank you for that. We have one more question that came up, and then I don't know whether you have a few minutes after this. We don't want to pose on your time, but we did have a question. People are asking, are you hiring?
I am. I am hiring 2 account executives right now. I'm midway in conversations with a number of people, but there's Pluma. It's on LinkedIn. I think my job posting.
What kind of, and I'll ask my question, what kind of requirements or what kind of qualifications are you looking for the account executives?
So at Pluma, we don't have an SDR team. So I am looking for some experience. We are very much of an enterprise sale. Our customers tend to be larger companies, and yet, our team, we've got a pretty dynamic team. They're fairly new. I wouldn't say they're like traditional enterprise sales people. I think I'm not, I'm looking for a little bit of experience, somebody who, has the fundamentals of understanding the tech stack, and understanding how to have those kind of conversations in sales. I definitely need a couple of years of closing experience in this role, but it's not and to give you guys an example, like, when I got that job at HelloSign, I was selling an API. 50% of my customers were technical engineers and developers and CTOs. I didn't know what an API was. Absolutely no idea what an API was. I just literally parked myself for the first 3 months in our technical support team, and shadowed them so that I could learn enough to be dangerous. But I think just being kind of having the tenacity and determination is a big part of it.
Thank you for that. We have a couple of questions, I think, in the audience. Can we throw it out? I think we have a few more. We get little hands raised. I think we have a few questions. Angelica, you said I think two more questions came in. Are we going to throw that to the folks that asked the questions to ask them?
Yeah, I can go ahead and ask if that's okay. Hi, Elizabeth. This is Laura. I just wanted to ask, you talked a little bit at the beginning of the hour about people who are good in tech sales not being afraid to put themselves out there. What other kind of soft skills would you say are the most valuable for a tech sales professional to have?
Good question. And by the way, there's a lot of different I don't know if you've heard of like Y Combinator and companies like that. They're job boards on all of those sort of things. I look for people who, um, are very transparent. I like one of the things that I love about tech over the kind of the old school financial services is you may have heard that difference between a leader and a boss. A boss is much more hierarchical and like tells you what to do, where a leader kind of gets on the ground floor and shows you what to do. And I like very flat organizations. So I'm really, I love, I think part of being really good in sales is being curious, asking a lot of questions, being transparent, being a constant learner, always open to feedback and continual growth. That's I think really. It's funny because we have, there I have a number of different types of salespeople on my side. I acquired the sales team and I love them; they're great, but they all come from very, very different backgrounds. But there's one thing that everybody on my team has is they want to be there. They want to be here. They care. They care about each other. They're collaborative, and that's really what I care the most about. Because I think if you're curious and you want to better yourself and you don't get defensive and you're willing to learn, and I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly learning. I learn from my most junior least experienced salesperson I learn from, so, I think being a team player and being collaborative are the most important things.
Great, thank you.
I thought we had one more question from someone. Anybody?
Yeah,
Anybody out there? There you go. Thank you. Go ahead.
no problem. I wanted to know your thoughts on work-life balance. I know especially startups tend to be very, you wear a lot of hats. It can be very demanding at times. What are your thoughts on making sure you're balancing that, and especially now that the lines are starting to blur because a lot of us are working from home, how do you balance that?
Yeah, it's critical. I mean, I'm a big believer in taking time for yourself and your family. And it was interesting because I think I shared with you when I was at HelloSign and we were acquired by Dropbox. I hadn't taken a good vacation in I don't know how many years, and I had planned. My kids are a little older; they're all college age, and so I had planned just 2 years ago to take them to Europe for 2 weeks. And it was Sunday before I was leaving when my boss called me and said, "I'm leaving the company." And it was like, all right, well, I mean, and it all kind of fell on me at that particular moment, but I was like, I'm going on vacation. Like, you have to, in fact, I don't expect people to work over weekends and all of that sort of thing. I'm one of these people that tends to, because I've had customers in IC roles in other parts of the world. So I will respond to emails over the weekend, but then I will also take time to walk my dogs in the middle of the day. I just think that you have to. And I think I do believe that particularly now, yeah, the lines are really blurred. They're really blurred because we're all stuck at home and it's hard to shut it down. But at the same time, I have two dogs. I have a 12-and-a-half-year-old and a pandemic puppy. And I actually have been laughing with my team that it was one of my team members was like, we're in this new world that the people within our house are now our colleagues. And I'm like, my colleagues are getting restless and one of them is eating the couch. So, it's, people are homeschooling. I mean, I have, there are people on our team, not even that necessarily are on my team, but, in the company, I mean, both that are like, I've got my kids home and I'm homeschooling and my spouse is working and I need to take my afternoons, a couple hours every afternoon to be with them. that's the world now. And I think people understand that. I mean, I've been on sales calls with, you know, people that are potential buyers that have their kids like crawling all over them, you know. And so I think there is some understanding around that now.
Any more questions out there? Anyone have any last minute ideas or thoughts?
I have a quick question. How did you decide, you know, after that gap, like now is the time to go back to work?
So full transparency. I mean, I was going through a divorce and I needed the money.
Mhm.
I knew I wanted to, though. I was one of these people that even, you know, I like to work and I like to be busy and I like to, you know, but, you know, even when I was working in volunteer capacities, but I needed the money. And it's amazing what you can do when your back is against the wall, right? I mean, that's a motivator, right? Your back is up against the wall and you don't have another choice. So, you know, you do what you got to do. And I think that can be a difference between success and not success. I'm going to be honest here from a hiring perspective. And this is something I saw, you know, at HelloSign Dropbox, and I've seen a lot, is that like my oldest son is got some learning disabilities. He's 24. He's at San Francisco State finishing up. He was at community college for a couple of years. It's taking him a longer time. Like I have found, you know, the talent in San Francisco is very, very good. You know, it's changing now, but you know, in the height of tech, this is where like the best people in tech were, because they had the skills and they had the experience and they had the access and they had the mentors and all of those things. And so the talent pool in San Francisco at the height of everything pre-pandemic was as good as it gets. I always found that the best employees came out of schools like San Francisco State that put themselves through, or, you know, community colleges, or, you know, then, I mean, I can't even tell you how many times there was somebody that came out of an Ivy League school that just needed a tutor sitting next to them to do the work. You know, and I'm nothing against good schools. I mean, I have, you know, one of my daughters up at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington, and super smart and doing well. But, you know, there's a scrappiness. You know, it comes from like, it's amazing what you can do when your back is up against the wall, and having the grit and the hard work that it takes to be successful. That's why you see so many, I'm convinced, so many, you know, super hyper successful people that, you know, in all different industries that are kind of these anomalies, right? The CEOs of huge companies that never graduated from high school. You know, you have to have that grit and determination. Not that being smart isn't, you know, important, but there's a lot of different ways to be smart.
I think that's a great way to wrap up. We really appreciate you having time, taking the time to be with us here today. And we'd love for everyone here today, if you would share your contact information, and then any resources. You can kind of tick through some of the resources, or how to get a hold of you and get a job.
Yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn, Elizabeth Andrew. You know, reach out to me, and I'm going to be honest. I'm 2 months into a new job, so still drinking from the fire hose a little bit, but I will respond. You know, at one point or another. I will share out. You know, I'll send over to June and Jennifer and you know, the team here at the resources that I have that might be helpful. And you know, there are a lot of resources out there, and there are, you know, you just want to make sure that you're taking advantage of them.
Well, thank you for that. And everyone that's here, Angelica will be around here, so she can answer any questions about our tech sales or data science programs. So don't leave if you have questions. But I just want to say thank you to Elizabeth for taking time out of her busy day. And I know it was busy. I know it started at 7 o'clock this morning. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you, June, Angelica, and all of you. It's great meeting you, and good luck.